The scent of expensive leather and imported cigars hit me before I even saw him. I was balancing 3 plates along my left arm, a skill I'd perfected over 2 years of working double shifts at Luminosa, when the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. The usual chatter of silverware against porcelain, the polite laughter of wealthy patrons, even the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. Everything muted. My feet ached in the second-hand heels I'd found at a thrift store last month. The kind of ache that starts at your toes and crawls up your calves, settling into your lower back like an old friend you never wanted. I'd been on my feet for 9 hours straight, and I still had 4 more to go before I could catch the last bus home to Emma. Emma, my 4-year-old reason for everything, for the bruises hidden beneath my uniform, for the exhaustion that lived in my bones, for standing here, serving people who spent more on a single bottle of wine than I made in a week. Table 12 needs water, Marco hissed as he brushed past me, his eyes wide with something I couldn't quite name. Fear? Reverence? I glanced toward the back corner booth, the one we usually reserved for celebrities or local politicians who wanted privacy. The dim lighting there made it hard to see clearly, but I could make out silhouettes, 3 men, maybe 4. One sat in the center, his posture relaxed in a way that suggested he owned not just the table, but the entire building. Possibly the entire block. My hands trembled as I set down the plates in front of an elderly couple who didn't acknowledge me. They never did. To them, I was part of the furniture, as invisible as the paintings on the walls. "Excuse me," I murmured, though neither looked up. The walk to table 12 felt longer than it should have. Each step brought me closer to that intoxicating scent, sandalwood mixed with something darker. Something that made my pulse quicken in a way I didn't want to examine. I could feel eyes on me, tracking my movement across the marble floor. My right wrist throbbed where Marcus had grabbed it this morning. Another argument about money, another threat wrapped in the guise of concern. "You're keeping my daughter from me," he'd snarled, his fingers digging into my skin until I gasped. Never mind that he'd never paid a cent of child support. Never mind the restraining order he violated weekly. I pushed the thought away and lifted the water pitcher, my reflection distorting in its silver surface. Dark circles under my eyes, hair pulled back so tight my scalp hurt. The kind of tired that no amount of sleep could fix. "Water, gentlemen?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. 2 men flanked the booth, both built like they bench-pressed small cars for fun. Dark suits, earpieces, eyes that scanned the room constantly. Protection. Serious protection. But it was the man in the center who made my breath catch. He couldn't have been more than 35, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a magazine cover rather than in a restaurant in the Bronx. Sharp jawline, olive skin, eyes so dark they looked black in the low light. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my annual rent, the kind of tailoring that whispered old money and dangerous power. Those eyes lifted to meet mine, and I forgot how to breathe. "Thank you," he said, his accent thick and smooth like honey. Italian. Definitely Italian, the kind of voice that made you want to lean closer just to hear it again. I poured water with hands that suddenly felt clumsy, hyper-aware of every sound, the liquid hitting crystal, my own breathing, the rustle of expensive fabric as he shifted slightly. "What's your name?" The question caught me off guard. Sophie," I stammered, keeping my eyes on the task. "Don't engage. Don't make eye contact. Serve and disappear. That was the rule for tables like this." "Sophie." He repeated it like he was tasting the syllables, memorizing them. "You've been working since..." He glanced at a watch that gleamed gold in the dim light. "Since 11 this morning, I think." My head snapped up. How did he know that? I noticed things. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth, not quite reaching those dark eyes. "You favor your left leg, your right wrist. You keep rotating it like it hurts, and you've checked your phone 4 times in the last hour. Someone you're worried about?" The pitcher trembled in my hands. "I should get back to..." "Sit down." It wasn't a request. The 2 men beside him tensed slightly, but neither moved. I can't. I'm working." "Enzo." He didn't raise his voice, didn't even look away from me, but one of the guards disappeared toward the front of the restaurant, toward Marco, My manager. Please, I whispered, panic rising in my chest. I need this job. I can't. You're not in trouble. His voice softened fractionally. When did you last eat? The question hit me like a physical thing. I couldn't remember. Yesterday? The day before? Emma always ate first. Always. I'm fine. You're trembling. He leaned forward slightly, and I caught that scent again. Sandalwood and danger and something else. Something that made me want to run and stay frozen in place simultaneously. Sit, eat. My treat. I don't accept. It's not a request, Sophie. The way he said my name sent shivers down my spine. Like a promise. Like a threat. Enzo returned with Marco trailing behind him, my manager's face pale and sweaty. Miss Chen, Mr. Salvatore would like you to take your break now. 30 minutes. Paid. Mr. Salvatore. The name triggered something in my memory. Whispers among the staff. Warnings about certain customers who weren't really customers at all. Men who owned the shadows between streetlights. Men who made problems disappear. Go on, Marco urged, his voice strangled. Take the break. I should have said no. Should have run. But my legs felt weak, and the room tilted slightly at the edges of my vision. When was the last time I'd slept? Really slept, not just collapsed between shifts? I sank onto the edge of the booth seat, as far from him as possible, though it wasn't far enough. His presence filled the space like smoke, impossible to escape. Bring her the special, Salvatore said, without looking at Marco, who scurried away like a frightened mouse. And espresso. No, make it tea. Something gentle. I don't drink tea, I managed. You will tonight. Those dark eyes studied me with an intensity that made me feel exposed, like he could see through the careful walls I'd built. You're malnourished, exhausted, and someone hurt you. It wasn't a question. My hand instinctively went to my wrist, covering the bruise. I'm fine. You keep saying that. I don't believe you. He leaned back, one arm draped casually along the back of the booth. But there was nothing casual about the way he watched me. A predator assessing prey, or something more complicated. The bruises on your wrist, they're not from work. It's nothing. Nothing. He repeated the word like it tasted bitter. A man's hands did that. I can see the finger marks even from here. So I'll ask you once, Sophie, and I want the truth. His voice dropped lower, dangerous silk wrapping around steel. Who hurt you? The room spun. Or maybe it was just me, the exhaustion, the fear, the way he looked at me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. It all crashed together. I tried to stand, to escape this impossible conversation, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. Sophie? His voice seemed far away now. The marble floor rushed up to meet me, and the last thing I registered before darkness claimed me was the scent of sandalwood and the feeling of strong arms catching me before I hit the ground. I woke to softness. That was the first thing that registered. The feeling of expensive fabric beneath my cheek. The kind of material that didn't exist in my world of threadbare sheets and second-hand everything. My eyes fluttered open to find myself on a leather sofa in what appeared to be an office. Dark wood paneling. Bookshelves lined with volumes that looked ancient and untouched. A massive desk that gleamed under a single lamp. Easy. His voice came from somewhere to my left. I jerked upright too quickly, and the room tilted. A hand, warm, steady, pressed gently against my shoulder, guiding me back down. You fainted. Salvatore crouched beside the sofa, those dark eyes level with mine now. Up close, I could see flecks of gold in the brown, could count the fine lines at the corners that suggested he smiled more than his current expression indicated. How long since you've eaten properly? I need to get back to work. My voice came out raspy. Marco will do exactly as he's told. There was steel beneath the silk of his words. And right now, he's been told you're taking the rest of the night off. Paid. I tried to sit up again, and this time he allowed it, though his hand remained close, ready to catch me if I fell. I can't afford. You're not listening. He rose smoothly, moving to the desk where a tray sat, the tea he'd ordered, steam still rising from the cup, and a plate of food that made my stomach clench with hunger. You fainted in my presence. That makes you my responsibility. I'm not anyone's responsibility. No. He picked up the tea, brought it to me. When I didn't take it, he wrapped my fingers around the warm porcelain himself. His touch was careful, deliberate, and I noticed how his thumb brushed over the bruise on my wrist. So light I almost didn't feel it, but the darkness that flashed across his face told me he'd felt it. Drink. I drank because arguing seemed to require more energy than I had. The tea was perfect. Not too hot, slightly sweet, with a hint of honey and something floral. It spread warmth through my chest, loosening the tight knot that had lived there for months. Better? He settled into a chair across from me, elbows on his knees, that intense gaze never wavering. Why do you care? The question escaped before I could stop it. Because you fainted at my feet looking like someone's been slowly killing you. And I'm curious why a woman who can barely stand still works a double shift. He tilted his head slightly. Also, you have kind eyes. Sad, but kind. I find that interesting. Something about the way he said interesting made heat crawl up my neck. The food. He nodded toward the tray. Eat. I should check on my daughter. The words slipped out before I could catch them, and I watched his expression shift. Something calculating moving behind those dark eyes. You have a daughter. Not a question. A statement, as if he was filing away information. How old? 4. My hand instinctively moved to my phone in my apron pocket. 3 missed calls from the babysitter. Panic spiked through my exhaustion. I need to call her. He was already holding out his phone, sleek, expensive, probably cost more than my car. Use mine. Your battery's dead. How did he know that? With shaking fingers, I dialed Mrs. Chen's number. She answered on the first ring. Sophie. Thank God. Emma's fine, but... Her voice dropped to a whisper. He was here again. Marcus. Banging on my door. Demanding to see her. I didn't let him in, but he's getting more aggressive. I had to threaten to call the police. The tea turned to acid in my stomach. Is Emma scared? She's asleep now. I told her it was just a loud neighbor. A pause. Sophie, you need to do something about him. The restraining order isn't working. I know. My voice cracked. I'll be there soon. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Just be safe. I ended the call, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the expensive phone. Salvatore took it from me gently, his fingers brushing mine. He said the name like he was memorizing it too, adding it to whatever mental file he kept. Your daughter's father? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. And he's the one who did this. His finger traced the air above my wrist, not touching, but the intention was clear. It's complicated. Uncomplicate it for me. His voice remained soft, but there was an edge now, something that suggested violence lived just beneath his civilized surface. A man is terrorizing you and your daughter, violating a restraining order, putting his hands on you. What's complicated about that? He's her father. Biology doesn't grant him the right to hurt you. I laughed, but it came out bitter and broken. You don't understand. Men like him, they don't stop. The police can't do anything until he actually hurts us badly enough, and by then, I cut myself off, realizing I was telling a complete stranger my deepest fears. But he didn't feel like a stranger. That was the dangerous part. Men like him. Salvatore leaned back, and something predatory slid across his features. And what kind of man do you think I am, Sophie? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning I was afraid to unpack. I think you're the kind of man who makes problems disappear. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. I think people are afraid of you. I think you're dangerous. Very perceptive. A slow smile curved his lips, and it transformed his face from handsome to devastating. And yet you're not afraid. I'm terrified. Of me? Of everything. The admission felt like stripping myself bare. Of losing my job. Of Marcus getting custody. Of not being enough for Emma. I stopped, pressing my palms to my eyes. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. What if I want to? I lowered my hands to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Something intense burned in those dark eyes. something that made my breath catch. "Eat," he said again, softer this time. "Then I'm taking you home. You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He stood, pulling out his phone. A different one than he'd given me, I noticed. "How many did he carry?" "But your car won't start. I had Enzo check it while you were unconscious. Dead battery. And the last bus left 10 minutes ago. Of course it did. Of course my car was dead. Of course everything was falling apart at once." "I'll call a cab." "With what money?" The question wasn't cruel, just factual. "You have $17 in your wallet. Not enough for a cab to the Bronx. How do you—" But I stopped, because the answer was obvious. He'd gone through my things. He knew where I lived. And somehow, that should have terrified me more than it did. "I'm taking you home," he repeated, in a tone that suggested the matter was settled. "You'll eat first because you're swaying on your feet again. Then we'll discuss Marcus. There's nothing to discuss. There's everything to discuss." He moved closer, and I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Up close, he was even more imposing. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that demanded attention, because men who hurt women, who terrorize children, who violate court orders. His voice dropped to something dark and promising. "Those men need to be taught lessons. And Sophie, I'm a very good teacher." The implication in his words should have sent me running. Instead, I felt something dangerous unfurl in my chest. Not quite hope, but close to it. The possibility that someone might actually help, that I might not have to fight this battle alone anymore. "Why?" I whispered. "You don't know me. Why would you help?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like he was memorizing every feature. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an intensity that made my skin prickle, because when you fell and I caught you, you felt like something I didn't know I was looking for. His knuckles brushed my cheek, so gentle I almost didn't feel it. "And I protect what's mine, Sophie. Always." The possessive weight of that word, mine, should have set off every alarm bell in my head. But exhaustion and desperation and something else, something I didn't want to name, kept me frozen in place as he turned away to make a phone call in rapid Italian. I picked at the food, my appetite gone despite the hunger gnawing at my stomach. Outside the office, I could hear the muted sounds of the restaurant, life continuing as normal while mine tilted on its axis. 20 minutes later, I found myself in the back of a black SUV, with windows so tinted I couldn't see out. Salvatore sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell that intoxicating sandalwood scent. The driver, Enzo, the same man who'd fetched Marco earlier, never spoke, never looked back. Professional. Military-like. The car seat. I noticed it then, brand new and still wrapped in plastic, sitting in the third row. "Why?" "Emma is 4. She needs a car seat." He said it like it was obvious, like dropping several $100s on safety equipment for a stranger's child was perfectly normal. "I had Enzo purchase it while you were resting." Something cracked in my chest, some protective wall I'd built so carefully over the years. "You can't just—" "I can do whatever I want, Sophie." His hand found mine in the darkness, his thumb tracing circles on my palm that made me shiver. "The sooner you understand that, the easier this will be." "Easier for what?" He turned those dark eyes on me, and in the passing streetlights they gleamed like a predator's. "For you to let me take care of you." Mrs. Chen's apartment building looked even more run down in the darkness, the flickering streetlight casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. I'd lived one floor above her for 3 years, in a one-bedroom that leaked when it rained and never got warm enough in winter. It was all I could afford after Marcus drained our savings and disappeared, only to reappear months later demanding rights he'd never earned. The SUV idled at the curb, and I noticed how Enzo's eyes constantly scanned the street, his hand resting somewhere near his hip where I suspected a weapon lived. This was their world. Constant vigilance, seeing threats in every shadow. "Thank you for the ride." I reached for the door handle, but Salvatore's hand closed over mine. "I'm walking you up." "That's not necessary." "Sophie." My name was a warning. "Every second you argue is another second your daughter waits. Stop fighting me and let's go." He was right, which made it worse. I nodded, and immediately both front doors opened. Enzo and another man I hadn't noticed in the passenger seat emerged first, flanking us as we walked to the entrance. The absurdity of it would have made me laugh if I wasn't so exhausted. A mafia boss and his security detail in my decrepit neighborhood, escorting a waitress home like she was someone who mattered. The elevator was broken again. It was broken more often than not, so we took the stairs. I was hyper-aware of Salvatore behind me, his presence filling the narrow stairwell. He moved silently for such a large man, with a grace that suggested violence was second nature to him. "Third floor," I murmured, though he probably already knew. "Mrs. Chen opened her door before I could knock. Her wrinkled face creased with worry that melted into shock when she saw my companions. Her gaze darted from me to Salvatore to the two guards, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. "Sophie?" "It's okay, Mrs. Chen. They gave me a ride home." I squeezed past her into the small apartment that smelled like jasmine tea and the herbal soup she always made. Emma was curled on the couch, her thumb in her mouth, a habit she only reverted to when stressed. My heart shattered seeing her like that. "Baby," I whispered, kneeling beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, and the smile that broke across her face made every aching muscle worth it. "Mama!" She launched herself into my arms, and I caught her, burying my face in her hair. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo I bought at the dollar store, like innocence and trust and everything good that still existed in my broken life. "I missed you," she mumbled against my neck. "I missed you too, baby girl." I pulled back to study her face. My face, but softer, rounder, with Marcus's green eyes that I tried not to hold against her. "Were you good for Mrs. Chen? She let me have 2 cookies. Emma's whisper was conspiratorial, like it was our secret. "Did she?" I tickled her side, earning a giggle that sounded like music. "That's because Mrs. Chen spoils you." "Someone has to," Mrs. Chen muttered, but her eyes were soft. Then they shifted past me, widening again. "Sophie, your friends are still here." I'd forgotten about them, which seemed impossible given how Salvatore's presence dominated any space he occupied. I turned to find him standing just inside the doorway, his guards having stayed in the hall. He was looking at Emma with an expression I couldn't quite read. Calculation, yes, but something else. Something almost tender. "Who's that?" Emma whispered, half hiding behind me. "That's Mr. Salvatore. He helped Mama tonight, like a superhero." Her eyes went wide with childish wonder. Salvatore's lips twitched, almost smile that transformed his severe features. "Something like that, Piccola." "What's Piccola?" Emma stumbled over the unfamiliar word. "It means little one." He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level, and I watched my daughter study him with the brutal honesty only children possessed. "You have your mother's smile. Mama says I have my daddy's eyes." Emma's voice dropped, and I felt her tense against me. "But I don't like him very much. He yells." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. When I glanced at Salvatore, his face had gone carefully blank, which somehow seemed more dangerous than anger would have been. "Does he?" It wasn't a question. "Emma, baby, why don't you go get your backpack? We need to go home." I needed to end this conversation before my 4-year-old revealed more than I wanted anyone to know. "Can Mr. Superhero come too?" Emma looked up at Salvatore with those trusting eyes that had never learned to fear strangers, because I'd tried so hard to keep the darkness of our situation from touching her. "I don't think—" I started. "I'd like that very much," Salvatore said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it. "If your mama says it's okay." Emma's pleading eyes turned to me, and I knew I'd lost this battle before it began. "Please, Mama. Just for a little bit." Every instinct screamed this was a terrible idea, that letting this dangerous man deeper into our lives would only lead to pain. But exhaustion and that treacherous spark of hope made me nod. "Just for a few minutes," Emma squealed, running to gather her things, while Mrs. Chen cornered me in the kitchen. "Sophie Chen, what are you thinking?" Her voice was a harsh whisper. "That man. I know who he is. Everyone in this neighborhood knows the Salvatore family. I know what they are." I kept my voice low. "But he helped me tonight, and maybe he can help with Marcus. At what cost?" Her gnarled fingers gripped my arm. Men like that don't help for free. What does he want from you? I didn't have an answer to that, or maybe I did, and I wasn't ready to examine it too closely. The walk up one flight of stairs became a production. Enzo went first, checking the hallway like we were entering a war zone. Salvatore stayed close to me and Emma, one hand resting on the small of my back in a way that felt both protective and possessive. Emma chattered the whole way, telling him about her preschool and her best friend Maya, and the goldfish she desperately wanted but we couldn't afford. My apartment looked even more pathetic through his eyes. The peeling paint, the secondhand furniture, the toys carefully organized in milk crates because we couldn't afford proper toy boxes. But Emma didn't notice. She dragged him to her corner of the living room where her small collection of books waited. "This one's my favorite," she announced, holding up a battered copy of a fairy tale book. "Mama reads it every night." "Does she?" Salvatore settled onto the floor with a grace that seemed impossible for a man in a suit that expensive. He took the book, and I noticed how careful he was with it, how his large hands cradled the worn pages. "Will you read it to me?" Emma beamed, climbing into his lap with the fearlessness of a child who'd never been hurt by a man. My throat tightened watching them, this powerful, dangerous man letting my daughter use him like furniture. Pointing at pictures and narrating in her enthusiastic, grammatically creative way. I should have stopped it. Should have pulled Emma away and ended this bizarre scene. Instead, I found myself moving to the kitchen, putting on water for tea I couldn't afford to offer, but would anyway, watching them through the doorway. "Your daddy," Salvatore said, during a pause in Emma's narration. "He comes here sometimes?" Emma's smile faded. "He's loud, and he makes Mama cry." "I see." His hand smoothed over her hair, the gesture so natural it made my chest ache. "And that makes you sad." "I don't like when Mama cries." Emma's voice went small. "She thinks I don't hear, but I do. She cries at night sometimes." I pressed my fist to my mouth, fighting back the tears that threatened. I'd tried so hard to shield her, to be strong where she could see. Apparently, I'd failed at that too. "Well," Salvatore's voice carried to the kitchen, steady and sure. "I don't like when your mama cries either, so maybe we should make sure that doesn't happen anymore. What do you think?" "How?" Emma's question was so earnest, so full of desperate hope. "Let me worry about that, Piccola. That's what grown-ups do. We solve the big problems so little girls can focus on important things like goldfish and fairy tales." I returned with tea, my hands shaking slightly as I set the chipped mugs on the coffee table. Salvatore had moved to the couch, and Emma was showing him her collection of drawings, stick figures that supposedly represented our family, though Marcus was noticeably absent from most. "Mama, can Mr. Salvatore stay for dinner?" Emma looked between us hopefully. "Baby, it's already past your bedtime, and I haven't even—" "Pizza," Salvatore said, already pulling out one of his phones. "What does Emma like?" "You don't have to." "Cheese," Emma bounced excitedly. "With extra cheese." He was already dialing, ordering in that fluid Italian before switching to English to specify delivery to this address, this apartment. Extra cheese pizza, breadsticks, something called tiramisu, that made Emma's eyes go wide when he described it. "Mr. Salvatore, Dante." He met my gaze over Emma's head. "You should call me Dante." The intimacy of a first name felt like crossing a threshold I couldn't uncross. "I can't let you buy us dinner. You've already done too much. You can't stop me either." There was amusement in his voice, but underneath, that steel remained. "Consider it payment for the privilege of your daughter's company. She's quite enchanting." Emma preened under the compliment, and I felt control of this situation slipping further through my fingers. The pizza arrived 20 minutes later, delivered by a nervous young man who took one look at Enzo in the hallway and nearly dropped the boxes. Dante paid him what had to be a ridiculous tip, based on the kid's stunned expression. We ate on the floor because my table only fit 2 chairs, and somehow it felt natural having him there. This dangerous man in his expensive suit, sitting cross-legged on my threadbare carpet, letting my daughter steal pepperoni from his slice while he pretended not to notice. "Bedtime," I announced when Emma started yawning, her eyelids drooping despite her protests. "But Mama—" "No buts," School tomorrow. I stood, holding out my hand. Emma looked at Dante with those pleading eyes. Will you come back? The question hung in the air, and I held my breath waiting for his answer. Part of me hoped he'd say no, that this strange interlude would end and life would return to its miserable normal. The other part, the traitorous part, hoped for something else entirely. If your mama allows it, his eyes found mine, dark and intense and full of unspoken promises. Would you allow it, Sophie? I should have said no. Should have thanked him for his help and closed this door firmly. Instead, I heard myself whisper, yes. 3 days passed before I saw him again. 3 days of jumping at every sound, checking over my shoulder, expecting Marcus to appear like he always did, angry and demanding, and ready to make my life smaller, but he didn't come. Not to the restaurant where I worked my shifts in a haze of confusion and anticipation. Not to Mrs. Chen's door, banging and yelling. Not even a single threatening text message. The silence was more unsettling than his usual harassment. You look different, Maria commented during our Friday night shift, nudging me with her hip as we folded napkins. She was the closest thing I had to a friend at Luminosa. A single mother like me, though her kids were older, and her ex-husband paid his support on time. Did you get some sleep or something? Something like that? I couldn't explain the way my phone felt heavy in my pocket, how I'd catch myself checking it for messages that never came. Dante had taken my number before he left that night, his fingers brushing mine as he programmed it into yet another phone. In case you need anything, he'd said, and the weight of those words had kept me awake more than Emma's occasional nightmares. Table 7 is asking for you specifically, Marco said, appearing with that nervous energy he'd carried since the night I fainted. VIP section. My heart stuttered. I knew before I turned around, before I saw the familiar black-clad guards flanking the corner booth. He was back. Dante sat in the same spot as before, but tonight he wasn't alone. A woman occupied the seat beside him, stunning in that effortless way that money and genetics combined to create. Sleek dark hair, designer dress, jewelry that caught the light with every movement. She leaned close to him, her manicured hand on his arm, saying something that made him nod, something cold and sharp twisted in my chest. Jealousy. Ridiculous, misplaced jealousy for a man I'd met once, who'd bought my daughter pizza and disappeared for 3 days. I forced my feet to move, carrying a water pitcher like armor. Good evening. Can I get you started with Sophie? The way Dante said my name silenced everything else. His eyes found mine, and the woman beside him went still, her gaze sharpening as she looked between us. Come here. It wasn't a request. It never was with him. I approached slowly, hyper-aware of the woman's assessing stare, the way her red lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. This is Isabella Marchesi, Dante said, his hand moving from where Isabella had placed it on his arm. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable. A dismissal. My cousin. She's visiting from Milano. Cousin. The relief that flooded through me was embarrassing in its intensity. Ah, so this is Sophie. Isabella's English carried the same musical accent as Dante's, but hers held notes of amusement. Dante has spoken of little else since Tuesday. I was beginning to think you were a ghost. Basta, Dante said quietly, but Isabella laughed. He's been very distracted, she continued, ignoring his warning. Making phone calls at all hours, having people followed. You've caused quite the disruption to his schedule. Isabella. This time there was steel in his voice. I'm just teasing, cousin. She waved a dismissive hand, but her dark eyes studied me with an intensity that reminded me of Dante's. Though I am curious what makes a waitress so fascinating to a man who typically only notices threats or opportunities. Perhaps I'm both, I said before I could stop myself. Isabella's eyebrows rose, and then she laughed. A genuine sound of delight. Oh, I like her. She has spine. Dante, you didn't mention the spine. I need to speak with Sophie, Dante said, standing in one fluid movement. Alone. Order whatever you want. Everything, then, Isabella replied cheerfully, but her eyes remained sharp on me as Dante guided me away from the table with a hand on my lower back. We ended up in the same office as before, the door closing with a quiet click that seemed to seal us off from the rest of the world. The scent of sandalwood enveloped me, mixed with aged leather and something else. Tension, thick and electric. "You've been avoiding my calls," he said, moving to lean against the desk. "You never called." "I sent 12 text messages." I pulled out my phone, the screen lighting up to show 0 notifications. "I didn't get any." He took my phone gently, his fingers brushing mine in that deliberate way that sent heat racing up my arm. A few taps, and his jaw tightened. "Your number is blocked. Someone changed your settings to filter unknown contacts. Marcus." It had to be Marcus. He'd grabbed my phone 2 weeks ago during one of his visits, claiming he needed to update his contact information so I couldn't ignore him. I'd been so focused on getting him to leave that I hadn't thought to check what else he might have done. "That's why you didn't respond." Dante's voice had gone soft in that dangerous way I was learning to recognize. He was furious, but not at me. "I thought—" He stopped, his hand running through his hair in a gesture that seemed uncharacteristically uncertain. "Never mind what I thought. What did you think?" The question came out quieter than intended. His eyes met mine, and the intensity there stole my breath. "That you'd reconsidered letting me into your life. That you'd realized what I am and decided to run." He pushed off the desk, closing the distance between us until I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "Would have been the smart choice. I'm not very smart lately." My voice sounded breathy, unfamiliar. Smart would be keeping my distance from a man whose cousin jokes about him having people followed. I did have him followed. No apology in his tone, no shame. "Marcus, your ex. I wanted to know what kind of man puts his hands on a woman. What kind of father terrorizes his own child. The admission should have horrified me. Instead, that treacherous warmth spread through my chest again, the feeling of someone caring enough to act, to protect, to stand between me and the darkness. "What did you find?" I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Nothing good." His hand came up slowly, giving me time to move away, but I stayed frozen as his knuckles brushed my cheek. "He has a gambling problem, owes money to some very unpleasant people. That's why he wants access to Emma. He thinks he can use her to get to you, to get money he believes you're hiding." "I don't have any money. I can barely afford." "I know." His touch moved to trace the line of my jaw. Feather light. Devastating. "I know everything, Sophie. The double shifts. The late rent payments. The fact that you haven't bought yourself new shoes in 8 months despite those heels killing your feet. The restraining order he violates weekly while police do nothing because he's never hurt you badly enough to warrant arrest. You investigated me. It should have felt like a violation. Somehow it just felt like being seen. I told you, I noticed things. And what I noticed was a woman barely holding on, drowning slowly while no one bothered to throw her a lifeline." His other hand came up, cupping my face between his palms. "So, yes, I investigated, because I needed to understand what I was dealing with, what you were dealing with, and now that you know." My hands had somehow found their way to his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath expensive fabric. "What happens now?" "Now?" His thumb traced my lower lip, and my breath caught. "Now I make him disappear." The words hung between us, a promise and a threat, and something that should have terrified me. "Dante, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm telling you how this ends." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my forehead. "Men like Marcus, they don't respond to restraining orders or police warnings. They respond to fear, to consequences they can't ignore. So I'm going to give him consequences, Sophie. I'm going to make him understand that touching you again means facing something far worse than any court system." "You're talking about—" I couldn't say it out loud, couldn't give voice to what he was offering. "I'm talking about protecting what's mine." There was that word again. Mine. Possessive and absolute, because that's what you are now, whether you've realized it yet or not. You and Emma both. Mine to protect. Mine to provide for. Mine to keep safe from men who don't deserve to breathe the same air. We barely know each other. The protest was weak, undermined by the way I swayed toward him. I knew enough the moment you fell into my arms. His forehead pressed against mine, and I could feel the tension radiating off him, coiled violence barely restrained. I knew I'd burn down the world before I let anyone hurt you again. That's not rational, Sophie. That's not normal. But nothing about what I feel when I look at you is rational or normal. What do you feel? I whispered, terrified of the answer. Possessive. The word was a rumble in his chest. Obsessive. Like I found something that was always meant to be mine but got lost along the way. His hands tightened fractionally on my face. Like if another man looks at you too long, I'll remove his eyes. Like the thought of you going home alone to that apartment, vulnerable and unprotected, makes me violent. That's not... I struggled for words. That's not healthy. No, he agreed easily. It's not. But it's honest. And I won't lie to you about what I am, Sophie. I'm not a good man. I'm not safe. I'm possessive and jealous and dangerous, and getting involved with me will complicate your life in ways you can't imagine. His lips brushed my forehead, achingly gentle despite his words. But I'll also keep you safe. I'll make sure Emma has everything she needs. I'll eliminate every threat, solve every problem, remove every obstacle between you and the life you deserve. At what cost? My voice cracked. What do you want from me? Everything. No hesitation. Your trust. Your time. Eventually, if I'm patient enough. Your heart. His hand slid down to my shoulders, steadying me. But we'll start smaller. Let me take you to dinner. A real dinner, not serving tables while I watch. Let me spend time with you and Emma. Let me show you what having someone in your corner looks like. And Marcus? Let me worry about Marcus. The darkness that crossed his face made me shiver. By this time next week, he won't be a problem anymore. Dante, don't ask me questions you don't want answered. His thumb pressed against my lips, silencing me. Just trust that I'll handle it. Can you do that? I should have said no. Should have walked away from this man who spoke of possession and violence like they were romantic gestures. But Emma's face flashed through my mind. Her fear when Marcus appeared, her tears when she heard me crying, her desperate hope that someone would make it stop. Okay, I whispered against his thumb. Okay? He pulled back enough to search my face. Okay, you can take us to dinner. Okay, I'll let you help. I took a shaky breath. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise you won't make me regret this. That you won't hurt us. Something fierce and tender moved across his features. I promise that anyone who tries to hurt you will regret the day they were born. I promise that Emma will never fear another man's anger. I promise that you'll never have to work yourself to exhaustion just to survive. He pulled me closer, until our bodies aligned in a way that felt inevitable. And I promise that once you're mine, Sophie, fully, completely mine, I'll never let you go, even if you want me to. The threat in that promise should have sent me running. Instead, I found myself leaning into him, letting his arms wrap around me like a shelter from every storm I'd weathered alone. I'm terrified, I admitted into his chest. Good. His hand stroked through my hair. Fear means you're paying attention. But terror and safety aren't mutually exclusive. You can be afraid of what I am, and still trust me to protect you. A knock at the door interrupted us, and Enzo's voice came through. Boss, we have movement on the other situation. Dante's arms tightened around me briefly before releasing. I need to handle this, but tomorrow night, I'm picking you and Emma up at 7. Wear something comfortable. Where are we going? A smile ghosted across his lips. You'll see. Do you trust me, Sophie? I thought about it. Really thought about the question and what my answer meant. Finally, I nodded. I'm starting to. That's enough for now. He pressed a kiss to my forehead that felt like a brand, claiming and protective all at once. Go back to work. Isabella will keep herself entertained. And Sophie? He caught my hand as I turned to leave. Check your phone settings when you get home. Make sure I can reach you. Because if I send a message and don't get a response, I'll assume the worst and respond accordingly. The possessive edge in his voice should have annoyed me. Instead, it made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Wanted, protected, like someone would actually notice if I disappeared. The next evening arrived wrapped in nervous anticipation that made my hands shake as I tried to button Emma's dress, a new one that had appeared on my doorstep that morning with a note in bold, confident handwriting. For Piccola. D. Mama, you're pulling my hair, Emma complained. squirming as I attempted to tame her curls into something presentable. "Sorry, baby. I'm just nervous. Terrified. Excited in a way that felt dangerous. I want you to look pretty, mister." "Dante likes me anyway," she said, with the confidence of a 4-year-old who'd been showered with attention. "He said I'm enchanting." She'd been talking about him nonstop since pizza night, weaving him into her elaborate make-believe games as the hero who solved problems and made people smile. Children had instincts about these things. They could sense danger better than adults sometimes. And Emma had taken to Dante like he was safety personified. Maybe she saw something I was still afraid to trust. The knock came at exactly 7. Punctual in a way Marcus never had been. I opened the door to find Dante in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent, but looked casual enough to pass as normal, almost. Nothing about him would ever read as normal. Not with that predatory grace, those eyes that tracked every movement, the barely contained power that radiated from him like heat. Sophie. His gaze traveled over me slowly, taking in the simple black dress I'd agonized over. My only nice outfit that wasn't stained or worn through. Beautiful. The word landed like a physical touch, warming my skin. "Mr. Dante." Emma launched herself at him with zero hesitation, and I watched this dangerous man catch my daughter, lifting her like she weighed nothing. "Ciao, Piccola. Look at you. Is this a new dress?" "You sent it," Emma beamed. "Mama said we should say thank you, but she said we can't keep taking your presents. But I really wanted to keep it because it has pockets." She demonstrated, shoving her hands into the sides of the dress. "See, pockets are very important," Dante agreed seriously, though his eyes found mine over her head, amused and warm. "Your mama is right that you should say thank you. But she's wrong about not keeping presents. When someone gives you a gift, Piccola, it's because they want you to have it. Refusing would hurt their feelings." "Oh." Emma's face scrunched in concentration. "I don't want to hurt your feelings. So, thank you." "Prego," he set her down gently. "Now, are you ready for an adventure?" "What kind of adventure?" Her eyes went wide. "The kind with gelato." Emma gasped like he'd promised her the moon, and I couldn't help smiling despite my nerves. He'd known exactly what to say to win her over completely. The SUV waited downstairs, Enzo at the wheel, another guard in the passenger seat. But tonight felt different. Less like being escorted and more like being courted. Dante helped Emma into her new car seat before handing me into the back with a touch that lingered on my waist. "Where are we going?" I asked as we pulled into traffic. "Somewhere Emma can be loud and messy, and you can relax." His hand found mine in the space between us, fingers threading through mine like it was natural, like we'd done this 1,000 times before. "I own a restaurant in Little Italy. Closed it for the evening." "You closed an entire restaurant?" My voice came out higher than intended. "I wanted you to be comfortable, not worried about Marcus showing up or anyone bothering us." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "Plus, the chef makes the best carbonara outside of Roma, and I thought Emma might enjoy making her own pizza." "I can make pizza," Emma practically vibrated with excitement. "Chef Marco is waiting to teach you." Dante smiled at her enthusiasm. He has 3 daughters. He's very patient. The restaurant was tucked on a quiet street, its exterior unassuming but elegant. Inside, it was all warm wood and soft lighting, with photographs of Italian countryside covering the walls. A round man in chef's whites appeared immediately, greeting Dante in rapid Italian before switching to accented English for Emma. "So you are the piccola principessa I've heard so much about." Chef Marco's smile crinkled his whole face. Come, we make the best pizza you ever taste. You like pepperoni?" Emma looked to me for permission, and at my nod, she took the chef's offered hand and disappeared into the kitchen, chattering away about her very specific pizza requirements, leaving me alone with Dante in an empty restaurant. "You didn't have to do all this," I said quietly. "I wanted to." He guided me to a table set for 2, complete with candles and wine glasses that caught the light. "You spend your life serving others, Sophie. Taking care of Emma, working yourself to exhaustion. When do you get taken care of? I manage. You survive. He poured wine. Something red that probably cost more than I made in a week. There's a difference. I want to show you what it's like to do more than just survive. By closing restaurants and buying dresses and... I gestured helplessly. This isn't real life, Dante. I don't even know what this is. This is me courting you. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Showing you what being with me looks like. Proving I can provide for you and Emma. Making you understand that you don't have to do everything alone anymore. And what do you get out of it? The question had been eating at me since that first night. I lowered my voice even though we were alone. You're a powerful man. You could have anyone. Why me? Why a broke single mother with more problems than solutions? He was quiet for a long moment, studying his wine glass. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. You want the truth? Always. My mother was like you. The admission came slowly, like each word cost him. Young, beautiful, trapped with a violent man who saw her as property. She died when I was 12. He beat her to death over a broken plate. His jaw clenched. I was in the next room and I couldn't stop it. Couldn't save her. My hand moved without conscious thought, covering his. Dante. I swore that day I'd never let another woman suffer like she did. That if I ever had power, I'd use it to protect the vulnerable, to punish men who hurt those weaker than them. His eyes met mine, raw with old pain. So when I saw you, exhausted, bruised, trying so hard to be strong while falling apart, I saw her. And I saw a chance to do what I couldn't do at 12 years old. I'm not a redemption project. I needed him to understand that. No. He turned his hand over, gripping mine. You're not. Because somewhere between catching you when you fainted and watching you with Emma, this stopped being about redemption and became about wanting, needing. You make me feel things I've spent 20 years avoiding, like maybe I could be something other than what my father made me. What did he make you? A monster in an expensive suit. No self-pity in the statement, just fact. But when Emma looks at me like I'm a hero, when you trust me despite knowing what I am, it makes me want to be the man you both see. Food appeared then, brought by silent servers who vanished as quickly as they came. We ate while Emma's laughter echoed from the kitchen, the sound a bright thread weaving through our heavy conversation. What happened to Marcus? I finally asked. You said you'd handle it. I did. He cut into his steak with precision. He's been relocated. Las Vegas, specifically. There's a casino there that needed someone to settle a substantial debt through labor. He'll be working it off for the next 5 years, under supervision that ensures he never leaves Nevada and never contacts you again. I should have asked more questions, should have demanded details about how he'd made that happen. Instead, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten what breathing freely felt like. What if he tries to come back? He won't. There was absolute certainty in Dante's voice, because I made it very clear what would happen if he did. And unlike the court system, Sophie, I follow through on my promises. I'm talking about protecting my family. He reached across the table, catching my chin gently. That's what you are now. You and Emma. Mine to protect. Mine to care for. And I take care of what's mine. Before I could respond, Emma burst from the kitchen carrying a pizza that was more cheese than anything else. Chef Marco trailing behind with an indulgent smile. Mama, look! I made it myself. Her face was smudged with flour, her new dress somehow still pristine beneath the apron they'd given her. It's beautiful, baby. I pulled her close, breathing in flour and tomato sauce and happiness. We ate her creation, which was actually delicious despite its lopsided appearance, while Emma regaled us with every detail of the pizza-making process. Dante listened like she was describing nuclear physics, asking questions that made her feel important, and heard. This was dangerous, I realized, not the violence he was capable of or the criminal empire he controlled. This, watching him be gentle with my daughter, seeing him look at me like I was precious, feeling safe for the first time in years, this was the real danger, because I could get used to this, could let myself depend on him. And then what happened when he inevitably realized we weren't worth the trouble? Stop, he said quietly, while Emma was distracted by gelato. 3 scoops, different flavors, in a bowl bigger than her head. Stop what? Thinking of reasons this won't work. I can see it on your face. You're trying to find the exit before you're all the way in. He leaned closer. I told you, Sophie. Once you're mine, I don't let go. You think I'd go through all this trouble just to walk away? People leave. My voice cracked. Marcus left. My parents left. Everyone eventually. I'm not everyone. He cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. I'm the man who's going to wake up next to you for the rest of your life. Who's going to walk Emma down the aisle someday and threaten any boy who looks at her wrong? Who's going to grow old with you and probably drive you insane with how possessive I am? Because that's what forever means in my world. Actual forever. We've known each other a week. I knew in one night. His thumb brushed away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. The rest is just details. So stop fighting this, amore mio. Stop trying to convince yourself you don't deserve to be happy. Let me give you everything. I don't need everything. I just need... The words stuck in my throat. What? What do you need? To feel safe. To not be afraid all the time. To believe that someone will still be there tomorrow. My voice dropped to a whisper. To believe you when you say forever. Then believe me. He kissed my forehead, my cheek, the corner of my mouth. Gentle touches that promised protection and passion in equal measure. Believe that I'll move heaven and earth to keep you safe. That I'll eliminate every threat, solve every problem, provide everything you and Emma need. Believe that loving me might be complicated and dangerous and messy, but it's also the safest thing you'll ever do. Loving you? The words escaped before I could stop them. Eventually. His smile was pure masculine confidence. I'm patient. I can wait for you to catch up to what I already know. Emma's sticky hands grabbed my dress then, pulling me from the intensity of his gaze. Mama, can we come back? Chef Marco said I can learn to make cannoli next time. We'll come back every week if you want, Dante promised, ruffling her hair. This is your place now, both of you. Anything here is yours. The drive home felt different. Emma crashed hard from her sugar high, sleeping with her head on my lap while Dante's hand rested possessively on my thigh. When we reached my building, he carried Emma upstairs while I fumbled with keys, my hands shaking from exhaustion and emotional overload. I should put her to bed, I whispered, as he laid her gently on her small mattress. I'll wait. He said it like there was no question he'd stay. I changed Emma into pajamas with practiced efficiency, tucking her in with her favorite stuffed rabbit. When I returned to the living room, Dante stood by the window, looking out at the street below with that constant vigilance I was learning to recognize. You don't have to stay, I offered, though the thought of him leaving made my chest tight. I'm not leaving you alone tonight. He turned, and there was something fierce in his expression. I'm not leaving you alone any night, actually. Starting tomorrow, you're moving. Excuse me? Into one of my properties. 3 bedrooms, safe neighborhood, doorman who's trained to recognize threats. Emma will have her own room, a yard to play in, security that actually works. Dante, I can't just... You can. You will. He crossed to me in 2 strides, hands framing my face. Because I can't sleep knowing you're here, vulnerable, with locks that a child could break through. I can't focus on anything except getting you somewhere safe. So you're moving. We can do it tomorrow or next week, but it's happening. You're very bossy. The complaint lacked heat. You're very stubborn. His lips quirked. We're going to have interesting arguments. Is that what we're doing? Arguing? No. He kissed me then, soft and claiming and full of promise. We're negotiating our future, and I always win negotiations. I should have pushed back. Should have insisted on independence and boundaries and all the things I'd sworn I needed. Instead, I kissed him back, letting myself fall into the safety of his arms, the certainty of his promises, the dangerous comfort of being claimed by a man who made problems disappear. Say yes, he murmured against my lips. Say you'll let me take care of you. Say you'll trust me. Yes. The word felt like surrender and victory all at once. Yes to all of it. His smile transformed his face, making him look younger, lighter. No taking it back, Sophie. You're mine now. I know. And I did. For better or worse, I'd let this dangerous man into my life. into my daughter's life, into the carefully guarded space around my heart. What happens now? Now. He pulled me closer, his forehead resting against mine. Now I show you every day what it means to be loved by a monster who would burn the world down to keep you safe. Now we build a life together. Now you finally stop surviving and start living. Emma's soft snoring filled the silence, a peaceful sound that used to be so rare. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, but inside this small apartment, I felt something I'd thought was lost forever. Hope. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" "For catching me when I fell, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for being what we needed when we needed it most." "Amore mio," he said softly, his lips brushing my temple. "You have it backwards. You saved me. I was just smart enough to hold on." We stayed like that, wrapped in each other while Emma dreamed, and the city settled into night. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow, because tomorrow meant waking up protected, provided for, and precious to a man who kept his promises, a man who'd caught me when I fell and refused to let me go, a man who'd made himself my safe place in a dangerous world, and that was enough. That was everything.